Well, the world's major central banks have raised rates at the most aggressive pace in 4 decades and are now at a critical point in their fight against inflation. Surprise hikes from Australia and Canada spooked investors and raised concerns over more tightening ahead. Over the next 2 weeks, the Federal Reserve, European Central Bank and Bank of England must decide how much further they can push. Yahoo Finance's Jennifer Schonberger has the story for us. Jennifer, what are you watching?
Good morning. That's right, Rochelle. Well, the Federal Reserve here in the United States expected to pause rates for the first time this week. Other central banks around the world are forging ahead with more rate hikes to tame stubborn inflation. After 8 consecutive rate hikes, the European Central Bank is expected to raise rates again by 25 basis points on Thursday, even as the Eurozone has slipped into recession. ECB President Christine Lagarde said last week it was too early to call a peak in core inflation and reaffirmed rates would need to be increased again. Economists also expect another rate hike in July before the ECB pauses for the rest of the year. The Bank of England is expected to raise rates at its next meeting on June 22nd by 25 basis points to at least 4.75%. Investors expect rates in the UK will hit close to 5.5% before the end of this year, marking another full percentage point higher after 12 rate hikes since December 2021. Last week, Canada surprised and raised rates for the first time since January after that bank paused its aggressive rate hike campaign to take a step back and assess whether it had done enough to bring down inflation. Australia also raised rates last week and warned of further rate hikes going forward. Back here in the United States, after 10 consecutive rate hikes, the Fed expected to take a breather itself to take a step back and assess whether it's done enough to bring inflation down. Rochelle?
And Jennifer, it's interesting because we tend to sometimes look at Reserve Bank of Australia as sort of the harbinger of what might be next. Do we get a sense of perhaps when we might see some of these global central banks on the same page?
Yeah, global inflation still remains an issue. The fact that you are seeing the Eurozone in recession right now indicates that perhaps there has been some traction being gained there. However, they are expecting a few more rate hikes or one more rate hike before hitting that pause button again. So I think it's this very much like take a step forward, wait and see, then take a step back. I think as we get towards the back end of this year into the fall, we'll have a better sense of whether demand has slowed down enough to bring down inflation and bring all of these central banks on the same page.
Indeed, it does seem like from month to month, they seem like they have an idea of what's happening, and then you get like some surprise consumer data and it could throw everything off. A big thank you there to our very own Jennifer Schonberger.
Consumer spending here in the U.S. versus consumer spending in Europe, you are seeing the consumer much stronger in the U.S. versus in Europe, where they have cut back a lot more. So there are different dynamics in play depending on what country you're in.
True, definitely worth keeping in mind. Thank you so much, Jennifer.